After considering the idea of what makes a movement practice, or what constitutes a movement practice, it leads us necessarily to the next question. What is the function of a movement practice? What do we use it for? So if we proposed that a movement practice is something more than simply linear development or progression, to use this relatively trapping term, and it's more about growth as an individual, as part of a collective whole, a community, a species, a living organism. What is the function of a movement practice with regards to facilitating this growth? If I fulfill the ambitions of a particular movement project, I'm standing on my hands now. I did the muscle up. I performed the Au de French. How does this equate to my individual and collective growth? Again, for the practice to contribute towards your growth, there needs to be a certain perspective from which that action is taking place. So previously we mentioned before that one of the main differences between a hand balancer balancing and a movement practitioner balancing on their hands as a proposal is that for the movement practitioner, it's part of a wider practice of personal development, and for the hand balancer, they're doing what they are, balancing on the hands. So to consider how this physical practice ultimately contributes towards growth, how it functions in this role, this idea of the movement perspective, that the practice is being carried out precisely with the intention of this greater development, of this wider development, of this more lateral and further reaching development, further reaching as beyond the physical practice itself. Because am I still a movement practitioner if I do not have a physical practice? If we are to answer yes to this question, then the physical practice must have a function beyond its own self-fulfillment, beyond the attainment of whatever we set out to do within those defined contexts of practice. Achieving a handstand for 60 seconds must give me something more than just the 60-second handstand. If it gives me nothing extra beyond this, for me it's not worth it. The time investment, the energy given, which can be given to so many other places, for me personally, it makes it not worth it. The trade is not worth it. But there is most certainly something more. So here is the proposal. The movement practice functions as the sandbox. Now, if you're not familiar with the term of the sandbox, it's precisely the same as the sandbox which you may have played in when you were a child. The sandbox is a place where you can play, You can experiment, you can try things, you can fail, you can succeed, you can learn. And its repercussions go little further than the sandbox. I can learn things in this place. It's a safe space. I can try things out. I can test myself. Through that, I innately learn things. I develop. I grow. And from that sandbox, I can apply those lessons. I can apply that experience, that lived experience, and ultimately that embodied experience which becomes a part of me. I can use it transferrably in other areas of my wider movement practice beyond the physical aspect of the physical practice. So the sandbox, to use another analogy, it's the same analogy but another area than which it's used. If you're familiar with making websites, a sandbox is a place you can tinker around and play and try things, and if it breaks the whole system, it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect the main site. It's just the place in which you can try things, learn, see what works, see what doesn't, see what optimizes, see what doesn't, and then apply. This is the function, as I see it, of a movement practice. So what lessons do we learn through a practice of movement when it's undertaken from this perspective? And again, this will not be necessarily the same for everyone. Again, it requires reflection, consideration, time to stop and think, why am I even doing this? What am I getting from this? And then with regards to the constitution of the actual physical practice itself, is this context actually of value to me in my general development and growth? Because sometimes when you analyze, you'll find yourself looking at contexts in which you've invested a significant amount. And ultimately, they will not give you anything more than the attainment of the goal. Again, this will change from person to person. For me, I once troubled myself deeply with the inability to perform 10 strict chest to bar pull-ups. This was a big problem. Very big problem. Quite literally keeping me up at night researching how I can resolve this problem. Spending time and energy investing in trying to overcome this problem. Ultimately, it took the words of someone much wiser than me, the insights and perspectives of someone beyond what I could see, to just slightly open a door and perhaps entertain the idea that this pursuit was not only damaging me on more layers than the physical, but it was going to give me absolutely nothing of enrichment towards my personal growth in return. And just as Krishnamurti would say, There is no gradual process to letting go. You must let go now. It happens now, or it never happens. There is no gradual let go. It goes now, and everything changes. This was a moment for me, as simple and trivial as its container is, 10 chest-to-bar pull-ups. But in that moment, I was able to realize and drop this at that point, and I never pursued it again from that time. Of course, I can perform 10 chest-to-bar pull-ups now, it's not a problem. But as a project of practice, as something that so absorbed me in my time and my attention and my energy, there was little value to be had from that linear direction in that very, very specific context. So what is a valuable context? What is an enriching context? What is worth me spending my time on? This, unfortunately, is not something that I can tell you, because this would be to directly interfere with your individual growth, your individual experience, your individual path. However, there's always a however, there are certain projects and certain aspects of practice which individuals who have approached them or combined them ultimately and merged them in confluence with a growing movement perspective, there are certain projects which individuals have continually, again, referred to as giving them a stimulus of growth that has served them beyond the skill or the capacity or the experience itself. So just to throw one out there, because we've been mentioning it a bit, a handstand practice. A handstand practice, a skill development practice, which can become so unbelievably refined, in which so much time can be spent upon, that requires consistency, energy, dedication, passion. Or without this, it simply does not happen. A project such as this, which takes years, and at the point of its attainment, to every degree of its attainment, because you will never attain the full desire of your handstand practice. But the attainment of those particular points brings an understanding. It teaches us patience. It teaches us about directed and consistent effort and what can be built from it. It teaches us de-ambition, that in order to sustain and stay sane in this continued investment over time, we cannot keep staring at the kettle until it boils. We cannot keep putting it on the pedestal and worshipping it. We just have to do the work. We have to de-ambition from the goal and just do the work. Teaches us practical lessons with regards to preparation. The many pit holes that are fallen into upon the way, whether related to injury, different places in the body, which can often occur in this journey. Teaches us these very, very transferable lessons, and this is where we come to the crux of the sandbox. It must be a place which teaches me transferable lessons which inform me beyond the physical practice. if I am incredibly invested in my physical practice, and I give it the utmost attention, and I never miss a session, and I'm always investing my energy and my time in this place, in my physical practice, and yet my social relationships, my family relationships are a shit show. My professional life and my ability to sustain myself financially and live a particular quality of life that helps me sustain my ambitions and contribute where I need to contribute to, this is completely in a shambles. If I can invest so deeply in my physical practice and open myself to new ideas within the realms of training and different protocols and this, that, and the third, but I cannot communicate and learn from someone who comes from a culture and a place that's alien from me, and I cannot accept a different point of view and entertain the possibility that my perspectives might be wrong or incomplete, then we have a problem. We have a big, big problem. A problem which has been termed domain dependence, which is essentially the antithesis of transferability. I am unable to transfer my learning from one place of practice into another or the wider whole. So this is the function of a movement practice. To teach us things in a form of a wet test, a trial, so that when the real thing happens in life, when the real load falls on your back, when the real stress looks you in the face, when the time to really de-ambition, let go, move forward, rebuild, when this really, really comes and faces you, how does your movement practice serve you then? What has it taught you? What can you bring from this time, energy, this invested experience that can be the soothing ointment, to use the words of Marcus Aurelius, for the ailment which falls you at that time? How does your movement practice help you through the struggle? The endless struggle. How does your movement practice function? For some people, this may be too deep, this line of thinking with regards to just practicing movement. It may be too deep. It may be too off the course of the real work. For me, this is just a shame, if that's the case. It's a shame. Because for me, this practice has been life-changing. I'm not the only one. By far, I'm not the only one. And I must emphasize again and again that I'm never coming from this perspective that when you get here, you'll realize. No, sir. Any individual who approaches any type of practice from this perspective, that they can learn something beyond the subject and the content of the task which they put in front of themselves. Any person, whether you're learning a guitar, to play the guitar, whether you're raising a family, whether your ambition is to cook the best ramen that anyone's ever tasted, whether you stare into the stars, whether you dive the deepest seas. There is transferable learning in all of these contexts about the wider condition under which we are always in and part of movement. So for me, this is the function of the movement practice, of a movement practice, a true movement practice. Dangerous word to use, true movement practice. But to then suppose that there's a false movement practice is something simply because of the investment, my own investment, the others who were invested in this practice in their own forms, from whatever perspectives, from whatever entrance points. There is a movement practice which functions truly, even if it's an ongoing developmental effort, and it will never be the true movement practice. But despite this, there can always be a movement practice which does not serve any of these functions. And on paper, in the video, to look at, to see, perhaps even to speak, seems like the real deal. It's a movement practice. And yet something so fundamental is missing. And the simplest question or lack of can betray that. Where is the emphasis in the practice? Where does the value lie? Where do the dogmas place themselves? What is being immovable? What is blocking transferability beyond that practice? As the popular Star Wars saying goes, watch out. It's a trap. And it can be very trapping. So we return again to this necessity to continually ask ourselves, what is our practice contributing to? What is the function that it is serving? And how is that function being fulfilled through the context in which I'm practicing? Only by attending to this, only by continually reflecting and learning from it and reinforming ourselves and evolving and developing over time, can we continue a type of growth which functions to serve us beyond the physical practice that we engage with on a day-to-day basis. These are my perspectives as they stand or sit now at this point in time. They will always be changing, but this is the backbone which has served me so far. Again, I hope they provide some valuable direction and perhaps inspiration for you in your own considerations. Keep being well and moving well.